Today's episode of Nerd Soup is brought to you by Skillshare. Skillshare is giving away a free 2-month unlimited access trial to our subscribers who click the link in the description box below. And after that, it's only around $10 a month.
It's been a few months now since the Game of Thrones finale has aired, and while I didn't dislike the final season, I was still disappointed in several things that transpired in the last 6 episodes of the series. Being such an avid fan of both book and show, it's been a bit strange dealing with the fact that we will never see an episode of the show again, and that the ending we got left such a divide in the fanbase. But recently, with the news of the prequel pilot finishing filming and the announcement that we may finally, hopefully, probably not, but I'll still remain optimistic, be getting Winds of Winter soon, I've gotten back the itch to return to the world of Ice and Fire. Along with that itch came not only a doctor's appointment, but also a few ideas for what other prequels HBO can make going forward. A number of prequels besides A Long Night or Blood Moon prequel are rumored to be in development, and there are so many compelling stories that they can take from George's vast and detailed fictional history. There may be some minor spoilers ahead for those who have not read the books or anything else pertaining to the extended history of the world of Ice and Fire. Although the show has given us the basics on how Robert's rebellion went down, there is still so much to that story that will make for a riveting miniseries.
What did the Mad King say when you stabbed him in the back? I never asked.
When the people rose in revolt against him, your father set their towns and castles aflame. He murdered sons in front of their fathers. He burned men alive with wildfire and laughed as they screamed. And his efforts to stamp out dissent led to a rebellion that killed every Targaryen, except 2.
I'm not my father.
The books go into more detail of how the events played out, but as a book reader, getting to see these events on screen would be amazing. Plus, having so many familiar faces return would be an easy sell for casual Thrones fans, making it a logical choice for HBO to consider. Just thinking about seeing a younger Barristan Selmy mowing down Baratheon men and fighting for Rhaegar at the Trident is getting me a little chubbed up.
Even now I could cut through the 5 of you like carving a cake! Here, boy! Melt it down and add it to the others.
Plus, he needs a bit of redemption after D&D decided it would be a good idea to have him killed in an alleyway like some kind of scrub. But getting to see the tourney of Harrenhal, where Rhaegar Targaryen crowned Lyanna Stark the Queen of Love and Beauty, getting to know these two after only hearing or seeing glimpses of them would be a real treat for fans of both book and show. It really speaks to George's writing how Rhaegar is such a beloved character only through mentioning him, and having him play a prominent role in the series and getting more insight on this character would be enough for me to watch alone. But add in getting to see the Mad King at his peak madness with Tywin leading the sack of King's Landing, a young Jaime Lannister with 2 hands earning the name Kingslayer, little Ned Stark learning to ride horses with his pal Robert Baratheon, who was a straight-up unit back in the day.
I knocked him down with the hammer. God, I was strong then. Caved in his breastplate.
Stannis chilling in Storm's End eating boiled leather from bookbinds and so much more. Give me a 10-episode limited series of that any day of the week. This next one will be a little new to those who have only watched the show because, well, there's no mention of any of these events in the series, which could make the series not as likely, seeing as this omission potentially could have some effects on the original series, but it could always be retconned. That is the Blackfyre Rebellion. Now, depending on how they want to handle this potential series could span decades of Westerosi history, with possible tie-ins and spin-offs including The Tale of Dunk and Egg, a popular set of novellas written by George R.R. Martin, which I highly recommend. I think an anthology series touching upon all 5 of the Blackfyre rebellions would be pretty neat and would be a perfect way to explore more of the history of Westeros leading up to more recent events. But the first Blackfyre rebellion is where there is the most potential to make a compelling standalone series. Much like Game of Thrones, a series about the Blackfyre Rebellion will include many of the same aspects that made many of us fall in love with the show in the first place. Political intrigue, backstabbing, maneuvering, years of build-up, playing the game, jockeying for power while the Seven Kingdoms split while impending war looms. The lead-up to the actual rebellion is far more compelling than the rebellion itself. The quick background on the rebellion is that King Aegon IV knighted his bastard son Daemon and bestowed on him the ancestral sword of House Targaryen Blackfyre, which many people felt represented the rightful heir. Daemon then took on the surname Blackfyre and took the sigil of a black dragon on a red background, opposite of that of House Targaryen. When Aegon was on his deathbed, he legitimized all of his bastards, and yeah, I think we all know how this plays out in the world of Westeros. Oh, and there's Bloodraven, and that fucking rules.
Sir Duncan the Tall. 4 pages for Sir Duncan. He must have been quite a man.
So they say.
Can't leave him now. Hey! Egg. I dreamed that I was old.
I mentioned these two before, and although their story overlaps with some aspects of the Blackfyre Rebellion, if HBO decides to wipe the Blackfyre Rebellion from their canon, there are still ways to get around that and tell a high-level Dunk and Egg story if they so choose. And I think that would be wise, as seeing as the novellas are very good, and both Dunk and Egg are some of my favorite characters. When you look back at Game of Thrones, some of my favorite parts were when two characters that were different in several ways were paired up together and went on a journey. Tyrion and Bronn, Arya and the Hound, Jaime and Brienne to name a few. If you can replicate those dynamics and apply it to the Dunk and Egg story on screen, then it could be something special. I can't count how many times I saw people say that we should get a Bronn and Tyrion spin-off, or another duo from the series, and that's what Dunk and Egg could potentially be. Two characters with different backgrounds, personalities, skill sets, teaming up and going on a journey. Throw in some trial by combat, some tourneys, acts of justice and heroism, and some good old-fashioned Westerosi politics, and you got yourself a series. Oh, and there's Bloodraven, and that fucking rules. Next up is the Dance of Dragons. If you recall, this was the story that Shireen was telling Stannis about.
What are you reading?
The Dance of Dragons.
What's it about?
It's the story of the fight between Rhaenyra Targaryen and her half-brother for control of the Seven Kingdoms. Both of them thought they belonged on the Iron Throne. When people started declaring for one of them or the other, their fight divided the kingdoms in two. Brothers fought brothers. Dragons fought dragons. By the time it was over, thousands were dead. And it was a disaster for the Targaryens as well. They never truly recovered.
Apparently Stannis was not the biggest fan. The Dance of Dragons is a Targaryen civil war that takes place between the years 129 and 131 AC, not to mention the years of build-up to the war itself. Martin writes about this conflict in his novella The Princess and the Queen and in Fire and Blood, where, and stop me if you heard this before, a family squabble regarding succession leads to a war that affects all of Westeros. It all started when King Viserys started to groom his daughter Princess Rhaenyra to be his heir since he had no male heirs. But then he marries Alicent Hightower, and what do you know? She gives birth to a boy named Aegon. Throw in a dead Viserys and Queen Alicent wanting to put her son on the throne, and you have a good old-fashioned Targaryen civil war. But this time, we have dragons. This story has everything you would want in a Game of Thrones spin-off. Multiple epic battles, dragon fights, political maneuvering, hauntingly dark decisions, and character moments, as civil war physically and mentally destroys those on both sides. Both wanting revenge, both filled with anger, leads to some of the more gruesome actions ever written by George. I think this will be a perfect prequel for HBO to consider, as it could easily span multiple seasons and is peak George in terms of quality writing. There are so many aspects and moving pieces in this story that I believe it will capture a lot of what made Game of Thrones so beloved in the first place. No Bloodraven though, and that's unfortunate.
The brave men didn't kill dragons. The brave men rode them. Rode them from Valyria to build the greatest civilization this world has ever seen.
Out of all the potential Thrones spin-offs, the story of Old Valyria can be one that spans over multiple seasons with endless possibilities for original storytelling mixed with established lore. Valyria is considered to be the most advanced and powerful known civilizations the world has seen.
How many centuries before we learn how to build cities like this again? For thousands of years, the Valyrians were the best in the world at almost everything.
And at its peak, the freehold spanned over most of Essos. The Targaryens were considered to be a lesser house of Valyria, and Aegon was still able to take over Westeros with relative ease.
Forgive me, Khaleesi, but your ancestor, Aegon the Conqueror, didn't seize 6 of the kingdoms because they were his right. He had no right to them. He seized them because he could.
And because he had dragons.
Well, having a few dragons makes things easier.
So just imagine what the more powerful houses of Valyria as a whole were capable of. The Dragon Lords that ruled Valyria would make for a compelling political drama, as well as delving deeper into fantasy elements pertaining to the abundance of dragons, sorcery, and blood magic. The Valyrian freehold spanned over thousands of years, so it may even be referenced or even visited in Blood Moon. But if HBO can hire passionate showrunners with the capacity to blend some of the higher fantasy elements with an intricate political drama, along with George to help fill in some of the gaps, then I think there's a ton of potential for an old Valyria series that spans 5 to 6 seasons. It could take place over many different periods of the Freehold, but if they want to connect it to a familiar story, then it can chronicle the time before the Doom, where House Targaryen begins their movements west towards Westeros. There are so many different stories and events that George has written or is planning to write that would make for a compelling series. HBO can go a number of different ways, including an original idea within the world of Ice and Fire. And as much as Season 8 may have left a sour taste in a lot of people's mouths, I'm still very much looking forward to revisiting this world and watching new stories unfold. And everything we hear from Blood Moon has me very optimistic. I hope it is successful and we continue to get more of George's stories on screen like the ones I mentioned. So what do you guys think? What are some spin-offs that you would like to see develop? Let us know in the comments what you would like to see, or you could just tell us how much you hate Season 8. Which probably has already happened by now. That's usually how things go around here.
While Dany kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet and Euron's forces, they certainly haven't forgotten about her.
Hey guys, thank you for watching this video, and we would like to thank Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Skillshare is an online learning community for creators, with over 25,000 classes in design, business, and more. Specifically, Skillshare is great for aspiring online content creators, people interested in starting their own YouTube channels. You will find thousands of tutorials in programs like Final Cut Pro, Adobe Photoshop, and Adobe After Effects, all softwares that are essential in online content creation. Recently, I've taken courses in creating GIFs in After Effects and Photoshop, as well as animating with ease in After Effects. These tutorials are made by creators for creators and are easy to follow and learn from. And remember, Skillshare is giving away a free 2-month unlimited access trial to our subscribers who click the link in the description box below. And after that, it's only around $10 a month.